Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. It is said that planning is very critical of every business. Going into a new year, how do you plan right? How do you get the plan right? How do you get the strategy right to ensure that you start on a good note and end on a good note? That is what we're looking here on PM Express Business Edition, getting the 2021 strategy right to ensure that you end the year on a good note as a business. Well, there's no better person to engage us on this topic than lawyer, corporate lawyer, business strategist, and whatever accolade you give to him, Mr. David Ofosudote. So, Dote, welcome to PM Express on Business Edition and Business Edition, sir.
Thank you, George.
And I appreciate your time so much. It's quite a tight time for firms like yours at these times, but you've had time for us as well. Some will say I'm so very, very grateful. And for you, how are you doing, by the way? Let me find out, how are you doing, by the way?
I'm fine. I mean, bumpy year because of the COVID, but we arrived safely.
Thank God. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned COVID. How would you describe 2020 for you, looking at the business landscape and your engagement? I mean, you struggle within a lot of sectors and spaces. How would you describe 2020?
Bumpy year, like I said. I mean, we started 2020, and I'm not talking about me as a person. I mean, 2020 was started by the business community with a lot of hope. New year, nobody expected COVID, and especially the impact it had. But then suddenly we had this very unexpected bump, which required a lot of people to stay at home for a period, work from home. A number of workers, had challenges. Those who had attack from COVID, and employers were very worried about it. And then, of course, the bigger social issue about people who basically earn just sustenance levels and therefore had to rely on some freebies from government, a bit of food supply in town, and then subsequently water and electricity. So all these things happening in a year when people had very high expectations of a very vibrant economy were kind of the challenges we need to face. And then you have to add the political side of it that also affects business. Voters register, national ID, going to elections, and then you are not sure, is it continuity or change? All these are things that we were confronted with as business persons in the course of the year, and both ourselves and our clients. And I think in the long run, we survived. And have always seen 2020 as a sudden, unexpected time that we were afforded, maybe by nature or by the circumstance of COVID, to reflect and rethink whatever it is that we were doing to see whether that was the right approach. And I'm not talking about our business, I'm talking about society as a whole. To test your business continuity plans, to see whether they were robust, to make changes to it. And then it afforded everybody the opportunity to decide what to do from 2021 onwards. So that's how I review 2020.
Let's look at the business community and even the business space, and even for business owners as well. What lessons has 2020 taught us with all the things that happened? To be more cautious, we shouldn't be too buoyant. The fact that, listen, no matter how good you are as a firm, we just cannot forget about the externalities and how that will impact on your operations.
I will talk about it from three angles, and I think there are three angles to look. First is, which is the most important, is the health and welfare of staff. I mean, nothing is more important than that. Without the health and welfare of staff,
you think that would impact?
I think that's the most important lesson.
Take it more important.
Yes, I think that's the most important lesson in any business.
People.
Yes, because they have to be healthy. How are you organized even in your office in such a way that they can work in a healthy environment? How are you organized in such a way that if they have to continue working from home, they can continue working from home? How are they comfortable? How healthy are they in case they got COVID? How are they handled? So the health and welfare of staff is one of the biggest lessons every organization should learn. The other one is that no matter how well you plan, there can be the unexpected. And I think that is a very, very big lesson. And because of two, there is three, which is that you ought to always have a business continuity plan, which can be adjusted to fit the situation. One of the things I have talked about in the past is I saw people who were talking about putting together a business continuity plan when COVID occurred. And I said that's the wrong time to put in a business continuity plan. You must have had it already. And when COVID occurred, what you do is to see how it's adjusted to fit the circumstances of COVID, because you cannot predict anything 100%. So if you understand these three things, then you will definitely plan, but make room for a bumpy ride in case, as they say in the airline industry, you have an unexpected bump. How quickly do you adjust in the unexpected bump? And you will find, and I speak to many businesses, you will find that for some, COVID was a positive thing.
Yeah.
For some, COVID was a very bad thing. In terms of its impact on health, we also felt the same, but some performed very well. Some businesses couldn't help it. I mean, no matter if you belong to the tourism and aviation industry, it cannot just be a good thing. I mean, so it depends on the industry, but even those industries which, where COVID, quote and unquote, enabled them perform better, some still nevertheless couldn't take advantage of the opportunity.
That's interesting, because I also wanted to look at whether it then makes a strong case for businesses to also localize strategy, which I'll be dovetailing very soon, of course, in the sense that the one-size-fits-all approach and where the multinationals, where we have a situation where strategy are being developed outside and just locked on you. Maybe then it would tell us, listen, COVID might have impacted certain businesses in Europe badly. The same cannot be said for us here in Ghana and even West Africa and even Ghana as well.
I think everything depends on context. And context means a number of things. First, where you are located is the number one dictate of what context is. So if you are operating in Ghana, then your context will include the context of the general environment, which includes how government operates and how that operation affects your business, which may be totally different from what is happening in Europe. And therefore, if you listen to too much CNN, you may make the mistake of positing yourself in America and therefore adopting a strategy meant for Europe or for America for your organization. So your strategy and how you see things must be context specific. And you have to look at the general context around how you see. So for me, what government does is very, very important in terms of context. And then what happens within the environment generally where you are. So again, we can't talk about Africa without talking about AFCFTA, which I'm sure you will
get more details on that one.
You'll be talking about. So that's a significant context which has happened over the period. And then even the global context, what will be the impact of Brexit, for example? It may look very remote, but you did
Ghanaian
see
companies already been affected by it because of the tariffs that have been applied.
Exactly. How your ability to export to Europe as a whole market, as distinct from exporting to UK, separate from France, Germany, and the rest of Europe. Or even the fact that government had just signed an agreement, if the report on 31st December is right, with the UK government. So we're beginning to see bilateral arrangements between the UK and a number of African countries. And the Anglophone countries are going to be a very key target for that. So all these things happening, including the extent to which government's income has really fallen. I mean, there's already a report of a recession in terms of two consecutive.
1.1 per quarter.
So these things will have an impact on how you strategize and how do you decide to go forward, as separate from your internal strategy regarding your strengths and the opportunities you want to take you want to take advantage of, weaknesses, etc. But it doesn't exist in isolation. And these things will dictate what are the imperatives you need to look at, what are the key triggers, what are the drivers of the change, what are the things that you put in place to ensure that you can survive this 2021 to 2030 decade.
You've mentioned strategy, and therefore I'll get into more details on that one. So I may be wrong, but have people already planned their 2021 strategy, or COVID has delayed? Because I believe the most businesses in the last quarter, even from the middle of the previous year, they plan what will be the plan, quote, the budget, the strategy, and all the rest. So it's still work in progress. So
there are two types of strategy when it comes to businesses. The first is what is normally called the strategic plan, which is the broader goal of normally a 5-year cycle. Some businesses do plan their strategy for a 10-year cycle, but that's very rare. So the average business will plan for a 5-year cycle. And unless 2020 or 2021 is the beginning of your 5-year cycle, then I assume you have already planned. So if you take my organization, for example, our strategy cycle ends in 2022, which is 2018. So we've already planned that long-term cycle. Then there is the yearly cycle, where the businesses take either the broader strategy or a specific strategy and decide which of them do we execute in the course of the year. What has changed? How do we amend or make any adjustments to it, etc.? So yes, to some extent, business have already planned, but to a large extent, some have not. Again, for the ideal world, I expect the business not to be planning in 2021.
Yeah.
Not to be planning for 2021 in 2021.
Okay.
I expect you to plan the latter part of 2020 for 2021. But there is a general trend or a general practice that in December people are just too much in a different mood. They gather at the beginning of January and do their strategy sessions. So depending on whether you are beginning a 5-year cycle, or a 3-year cycle, or a 10-year cycle, or you are just doing one of the years, I do think no matter how well you have planned already, there is always room for adjustments. I mean,
Let's look at those who might be doing the yearly adjustment and the yearly reviews. George Uafi and Co. I have started my review meetings. I'm trying to plan for the year. This week, we've started our series of meetings and all the rest. How should the happenings of 2020 and COVID impact on my yearly strategy that I'm doing, which have started this year?
So a lot, but I think we've learned the lessons of COVID. I mean, like I said, health and safety is prime. And I believe that most organizations, if not all, have already put in place their COVID response. The larger issue as to whether people are going to be taking vaccine or not, and then those conspiracy theorists and others who don't believe in vaccine, etc., that's a separate discussion. But I believe the general plan for the health and safety of staff have been put in place. So the lessons of COVID have been learned. Apart from the health, is the lessons of COVID which should have been learned by now is how you work. Do you work from home? Do you work from remote? Any people are working from home, how do they get equipped to work from home? Do they come to the office? How are they seated in the office? Are they the kind of people who are in the logistics chain where they move about? How do they wear their mask? What kind of transport do they move in? How often do they wash their hands? All those lessons I think have been learned. So I think the lessons from COVID, I will quote and unquote take for granted. What I see, which I think we ought to be doing a bit more about, is the non-COVID issues. Because there are a lot of non-COVID issues which tend to be overlooked. I mean, there is so much talk about COVID that businesses think that's the only thing to plan for. Within 2020, a number of things happened. Elections happened, as an example. Government income went down. Yeah. Does it foretell, for example, that in 2021 there will be increases in taxes? I'm not so sure.
It could happen.
But for me, one of the quickest adjustments we've already done to our plan was to have looked at the first 3 months cycle budget, which was presented in November by the minister. And just one item is enough, or I should say 2 items. There's an item which, if my information is right, comes to approximately about 30% of debt servicing of the amount of money to be spent. And then another 30% or so for amortization. What this means is that about 70% of the recurrent expenditure for the first quarter is going to deal with the debts we have already accrued. So what that tells me, as somebody who advises businesses, is that there's going to be a lot of constraints on the part of government. Then I look at the fact that 2 parties have both made promises to deliver infrastructure, to maintain free SHS, to some extent to support students in the university. So I expect a lot of additional burden on government. And then you have the fact that there is a tight parliament. All these things are beginning to then look at how will the government sector look like. Then depending on that, which sector do I play in, and to what extent I depend on government, or does government activity affect my business? If I put all that together, 3 key words come to mind. And by the way, before I come to the 3 key words, then I look at the larger community, the global community, the RCEP, that's the Regional Comprehensive Agreement signed by China with Asia, Brexit. The fact that Biden is taking office, it will be a different policy than Trump. Then, of course, Africa Free Trade Area, which has commenced, and headquarters, which is here. 3 things I will look at my strategy if they are not already in it. 1, I will learn to reinvent. 2, I will learn to integrate. And 3, I will learn to transform. We can elaborate a bit more on why these 3 words are very, very key. But the context of COVID and the context of 2021, if you look at 2021 as just the beginning of a decade, and that's very important, it's extremely dangerous for a business to look at 2021 alone. No matter how much time frame you have, look at 2021 as a decade beginning to 2030. The reason is that we almost lost 2020, which was the beginning of the decade. So between 2021, a lot of things which are pent up are going to start, coming up. Within that time frame, I will look at how I play around these 3 words as the drivers for whatever I will do in my strategy.
I engage some people and they believe that, listen, George, and just like what I've gotten from your submission, we might be focusing too much on COVID.
Yeah.
COVID has come to live with us. Let's find a way around it. And therefore, in your planning, don't be too COVID phobia, COVID
centered.
or COVID
driven.
Yeah.
I mean, there is the truth of that. There is also the other side of that. And again, a lot of things depend on the industry you play in. There are those whose businesses depend on COVID or have come to depend on COVID. Let's talk about those who are in the sector of PPEs, which suddenly, as you said earlier, government is looking, quote unquote, inwards, and people are supplying PPEs, which used to be imported from China, etc. If you are in that kind of business, you plan around COVID. Indeed, you may want COVID to last a bit longer. Let's face facts. I mean, because their businesses are around it, and there are new supply chains. If you are in the pharmaceutical business, you will wish to get the kind of deal India is getting, because the vaccines are going to be manufactured in India. A lot of them are going to be. We haven't built a manufacturing base for the mass one, so we will have to import and still burden our FX. So if you are in that kind of business, you have no option but to be COVID-centric. However, I've made this point before, I believe, in a discussion with you, that you have to look at the time frame. Nobody can predict when COVID will go away, but I definitely don't expect COVID to be around in another 5 years. And I just look at it from the cycle of pandemics from 1620, 1720 to 1920. If you look at those cycle of, within a year, maximum 2, they go away. So if you are your business is COVID-centric, don't use a 5-year time frame as the basis of your business growth. Don't expect PPEs to boom for 5 years, as an example. So yes, I agree with your point. We don't have to overemphasize COVID, but those who can take advantage of it should. I mean, why not? And lastly, even on that point, one of the things I think COVID has taught businesses, and some businesses and maybe government sector perhaps didn't take too much advantage. COVID is also a cost-saving measure, because if you cut travel costs, if you cut attendance at conferences, that's a significant part of income saving. I'm not so sure how much government saved on that, but I would have expected that COVID should also be a time for us to save, reduce our expenditure.
I'll be coming back to you to get more understanding about living with COVID as a business and the cost implications and the savings implications and even planning going forward. This is PM Express Business Edition as we look at getting the 2021 strategy right as a firm, and how do you make sure that you start well and you end well. I'm engaging David Fosudote with the AB and David law firm. He's into business strategy, planning advice, and also one of the best lawyers if you can think about it in time to corporate planning and corporate strategy as well. My name is George. If you take a short commercial break and we'll be right back. Welcome to PM Express Business Edition as you look at getting the 2021 strategy right as a business so you end well. With COVID, without COVID, and all the things that are going to happen this year, how do you make sure that you end on a good note? Maybe it might not be that good for you in 2020, but 2021 might be that good. David Fosudote is a lawyer, strategist, a business advisor, and is getting at some insight as to how you get it right as a business. We're trying to talk about living with COVID as you wrap up on this, and how would COVID, living with it, be a factor to consider in all the planning that you go for, your budgeting and all the rest? Because it has been good for some people, as you said, they've done so well with COVID. Some also have made some huge savings.
Yeah, I think, as I indicated earlier, the issue of being COVID-centric depends on your industry. And having said that, I'm a strong advocate that even if your industry is centered around COVID because you are taking advantage of it, plan beyond it. I cannot say when it will end, but the only thing happening in town is not COVID. There is something, other things happening in town. So you need to look at what else is happening. And over there, and again, I want to emphasize that we are looking at a 2021 to 2030 time frame. Okay. So you can't plan with a pandemic lasting 10 years. There will be some solution of some sort, or the pandemic itself may go away, or the vaccines may change the situation, or whatever it is that will change the situation. I mean, history tells us that. So I think the living with it part has to do with the health and safety part, or the businesses that take advantage of it, which I've talked about. Beyond that, look at what else is happening that you can take advantage of that will help you be able to attain one of the objects that I thought about, which again I must emphasize is you need to reinvent. And maybe I should elaborate on that. The reason you need to reinvent are several factors. One is COVID. If your business was invented in a post-COVID era, over the next 1 year or so, and when I say invent, I mean the processes and the things that you use. One of the things that will happen over the next 1 year is the COVID impact. And you need to reinvent to fit if you've not already reinvented. But again, that's for me a transitional reinvention. The more permanent reinvention is the context. If your business is in Africa, which is where we are, the free trade agreement impacts on your business directly, whether you like it or not. So you have to react to it, and you have to reinvent your business to be able to fit the context. It doesn't mean upskill, no. It could mean inventing your business in such a way that you can actually upgrade. There's a difference between upgrading and upscaling. Upgrading is the type of thing that enables you to serve the international market, irrespective of the fact that you are serving the local market. So, for example, if you manufacture ties or shirts, you should be able to integrate it in a supply chain, no matter how small you are. But the quality must be upgraded to be able to fit into that supply chain, which takes me to integrate. And you need to integrate because you're either integrating in a larger market, no matter how small your business is, or integrating your systems in such a way that they can fit the new era within which that we live. And the last word I gave is transform. You definitely have to transform your business looking at the trends which are happening. By 2030, I mean, I don't have to be a magician to tell you that. By 2020, quote and unquote, the world will not be the same. The pace of technology, the trends we see is such that things will change significantly. And a good business strategist, when they do the so-called PESTEL, they foresee what is happening, and then your vision and what you want to attain anticipates it, and you take steps in anticipation of that. If you have a bumpy ride like we had in COVID, fine, you make adjustments tactically, and you still, as much as possible, stick to the goal, but achieve it through a different mechanism.
You mentioned a very critical thing when you spoke about the Q1 and government expenditure and all the rest. And the debt stock is rising. It looks like government may have to look at find innovative means to settle that. As a business, should I be worried by this development? Because then it could come in the form of government also expanding the tax net to try and finance the deficit and all the rest. How should I be worried, and how should it also impact in my strategy for the year?
Maybe because I'm a perpetual optimist, worry is not the right word I will use, but I should be very concerned about it. And I should look at how do I anticipate right, and how do I prepare for that if it happens. Because for every situation, it can be positive or negative. AFCFTA is going to be negative for some people, for sure. Yeah. Like I said, COVID was negative.
Those were just important from Far East and just packaging everything locally.
So if you look at what it is that government is likely to face, you have to still nevertheless take a positive attitude, and which is that in the realization of this, is it a threat to your business? And if it's so, how do you respond and put measures in place to ensure? So let's assume that there's increase in taxes. Let's assume that. That would
Which might
definitely
not be
mean
out of place, though.
Yeah, that would mean definitely increase in expenditure. In what ways do you cut expenditure? And then you would recall what I just said, that COVID is also an expenditure cutting measure. So you then decide that, look, I'm going to go to less physical meetings or less travel, and I'm going to do work from home. I'm going to reduce my transport costs and do a lot more remote work, etc. So these are all measures that you can put in place to sustain. And then, no matter how bad the situation is, there is always some advantage to be taken. I did say, I would be surprised if we don't see, I will not call it a boom initially, but if I don't see an increase in the number of infrastructure projects being delivered. Okay. And infrastructure by its very nature has a multiplier effect on the economy. So if I am in a business that has some linkage with such area that I expect government to increase its expenditure in, I will look at what advantage I can take off. And not just ordinary infrastructure, social infrastructure as well. I expect a lot of delivery of educational and health facilities, for sure. I expect some changes in the financial sector. I think there's already a signal that they will go back to the capital markets. But again, for me, the devil is in the detail. What is it that the capital markets money is going to do? And then I will look at how that affects my business. I'll pick the manifestos of the two parties, which I have done, and look at it and see what are they promising to do. And now that we know who is taking over, what is it that we are going to do, and how do I position myself to benefit from it? That's how a businessman should be thinking.
Do you think it will be business as usual, because then there will be some level of continuity because it's the same government, or
it definitely cannot be.
It can never be business.
It cannot be business as usual for several reasons. Again, one, already COVID has not made it business as usual. Second, the nature of the parliament will not make it business as usual. Three, I think there's going to be a lot of financial constraints which will make it difficult for the government to make business as usual. And four, the very nature of changing things will not make it business as usual. Now, when I say it's not going to be business as usual, it doesn't mean I'm expecting suddenly that everything will, change overnight. But I'm definitely not expecting a large number of ministries. I think people complain about the number of ministers, 120 or thereabouts. I expect a significant reduction in that. I'll be surprised not to see that, but I expect that there will be a reduction in the number of ministers, which means that things will be streamlined. And therefore, again, I will not call it business as usual. Again, how do you respond to this? How does any of the new ministries affect the sector in which you are in? What are the policies they are going to come out with? And again, as businesses, are we just waiting for them to come out with policies, or we are influencing? We can also influence the policies they come out with. So I don't expect business as usual.
The nature of parliament as well, and I see you as an optimist. I don't want it to be seen as the externalities and whether I should be worried by that. But especially for the multinationals and for companies that are coming in, they need agreement from parliament, they need certain firm confirmations, tax waivers, and all the rest. The nature of parliament right now, I should go back and revise my note as a businessman.
Definitely you have to, which is why I've said that I don't expect it to be business as usual. But again, if I recall, the government itself has indicated that they will do less and less tax waivers, and that's what I expect. I am not so much a supporter of tax waivers for foreigners as against. You take, and let me give you an analogy, an analogy we were doing just recently, which will surprise you. The government has something called passed something called the LI 2354, which is the local content policy for the energy sector. Now, that policy has a provision in it for what we call margin of preference when government purchases items. The Public Procurement Authority guidelines also has a margin of preference. Long and short, what it means is that if you are buying items and the price for the Ghanaian is by 15 percentage points higher than that of the foreigner, you should buy that of the Ghanaian. So that's what is called a 15% margin. But in reality, if ministries are not detailed enough to realize that when they are checking the prices, they should be checking, for example, whether the foreigner is quoting CIF or FOB. Because if the person is quoting FOB, his price is already marginally low. Yeah. And no matter how much margin you give the Ghanaian is still going to lose it, or whether there are conditions like availability. So what I expect businesses to do is to put enough pressure on government to ensure that the government policies that they give is detailed enough and are implemented, and that they also monitor the implementation, because governments come up with nice policies, but at the end of the day, businesses do complain that these policies are not being implemented, but the businesses must put pressure on them. So I think that it behoves on all of us to look at what it is that government is coming out with, how it affects whatever we do, and how is it that it affects our strategy, and how do we ensure that we are influencing, monitoring its implementation if it is to our advantage, and if it's not to our advantage, making sure that we draw the government's attention to the mistakes in the policy.
I believe it will be a good time again to do an outlook, again looking into the crystal ball, and I'll be bringing your crystal, the Africa Ball program as well, that looking into the crystal ball in terms of outlook and all the rest. I'll be also looking at gauging your expectation and the top issues that we should all be looking at. What should we be expecting if you're a businessman when you do the outlook or you look into the crystal ball? And I'll also be coming to your crystal ball program as well. We should be expecting. If we look into the crystal ball as a businessman and all the rest, what should we be seeing in this ball?
Number one on my list is business process changes. There's going to be a lot of process changes, especially those who are in the export sector.
Because of the free trade agreement?
Yeah, because of the free trade agreement. It's more pervasive than we would like to believe, and the response to it is slow, like any other thing. So have teething problems. But if suddenly you are exporting and you realize that the tariff has been dropped out of the 90 by maybe the 90% of the goods has been dropped by, let's say, the first 20% margin, or that the documentation you need to complete, or that you need an AFCFTA number, for example, these are not things you are used to. So by the time the Secretariat settles and start implementing these things fully, processes have to be reinvented by many organizations, and they must learn how to comply with it. That's just one aspect of it, if you are involved in export. But if you are not involved in export, it's even more important. Because the laws of many countries will be adjusted to fit it. In a free trade area, you are not the same as in any. So let's take services as an example. And the services sector, which have been added to the first phase, includes construction, transport, tourism, business support services, and the banking and financial sector. That means the regulators like Bank of Ghana, SEC, have to readjust their regulation in order to ensure that we can operate in a free market. If let's say a construction company in Nigeria decides to open an office in Ghana, the restrictions you can put on it is limited. The role of GUTA and the kind of fight they have, GIPC, the excluded areas for Ghanaians, I'm not saying that this will go away overnight, but you have to do a new rethinking. And if you are looking at how I look at strategy for a decade period, you need to begin to look at what will change, monitor what bills are in Parliament, what are the bills saying. I'll give you another example. Value addition is a major driver of the CFTA because manufacturing, it's estimated that Africa's manufacturing will hit $1 trillion by the year 2030. Fast-moving consumer goods, especially food, currently urban food imports about $35 billion per annum. It's expected to hit $110 billion by 2025 and $135 billion by 2030. Now, if you have a very urbanized continent and urban food consumption is going up, whose food is going to be consumed? And in urban areas,
your first food is a commercial farmer,
so I mean,
large-scale farmer.
Yeah, and take a very simple example. Just walk to ShopRite. It's not magic, and see how many of the goods on the counter is produced from Ghana. People go to ShopRite and buy wache in the afternoon. If the rice is from Ghana, fine. So if you are supplying the rice, that turns out to the wache to be, because the amount of wache consumed at ShopRite is going to increase, it's not going to go down.
Let me cut in a little bit as we zoom in more on the outlook as well. The free trade area deal. I mean, there have been a lot talked about it, the literature, documented papers and all the rest. I've said a lot of things about it. Are we being too optimistic and excited by this? Or the two Ghanaian firms, Gando and Casapreco, have taken advantage of it? But are we being too excited about this that there are some saying that, listen, I look at Brussels and I look at the European Union, and I would say that the biggest beneficiary of the EU is Germany.
I've been making that point myself.
and so, are we being so excited by this? But the reality on the ground is that maybe we won't benefit at all from
Look, I think no situation, absolutely no situation is as important as how you respond to it. And as a strategist, that's how you have to think. You've already told me about how Casapreco and Gando have taken advantage of it. So somebody is going to take advantage of it. Somebody is going to lose, definitely. But whether you lose or take advantage of it depends on what you see and how you respond. I don't think excitement is the issue. I'm not quote and unquote so excited about it in that.
Headquarters here in Ghana.
No. The headquarters brings its advantages in terms of the number of civil servants we will get here, in terms of travel, etc.
Commercial capital for the EU.
Not necessarily.
The Secretary General yesterday was saying at the program that
yes,
they have lobbied to make Ghana the commercial hub for.
I know, but the commercial capital, quote and unquote, I will take it for granted. But as to whether we put the things in place that make us a commercial capital is a separate issue. So two things may be important for it. One is a financial services hub. Can we create a financial services hub? And I can give you the data. The biggest financial service hub in Africa is actually Mauritius. And you want to look at the likes of Mauritius, Egypt, Morocco, South Africa. These are the significant ones. But Rwanda has launched its financial services hub and hired the Ivorian who used to work with Credit Suisse, the name doesn't just come in. To help them with it. So such strategic moves, and which are first mover advantage, for want of a better word, may position them equally in the SADC or Central African zone. So that's one factor, the financial services. The other one is the logistics hub. I'm not so sure that we are well positioned as a logistics hub, which we can take very easily because of our location, because of the location of the secretariat here, because of the transit routes. But if, for example, our border is closed, it makes land goods logistics movement become challenged in the short term. So, but I do know that the government has plans in place to do this. It's a question of how we speed it up and how we are able to. So it's not about the excitement for me as a strategist, no. It's about the recognition of an emerging trend. And how businesses respond to it. That is what is important. Does it affect you? So I was giving you the construction example. If a construction company decides to locate here, they will have a right to locate here. And if they have the kind of might that can enable them take your business away, that's how you need to think about it and respond to it. Or will you preempt it by having a discussion with another construction company in another country so the two of you integrate? That's why I've told you that for me, the words that I'm playing on my mind are the words like reinvent, integrate, transform.
Let me take a break and we'll be back at this commercial break. This PM Express Business Edition, as you look at getting the 2021 strategy right as a business. How do you get it right and how do you end the year on a good note? We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition on talking about the 2021 strategy, and we are engaging Mr. David Ofosudote, who is giving us some advice on how to get it right as a business. So we'll be dovetailing a discussion into one of his biggest programs that is done that every business talks about, the Crystal Ball program, and also the inauguration of the president as well. What are your expectations as a businessman? Should be business as usual, or maybe, listen, things might change and all the rest and blah, blah. So again, another year is us here with us again. Crystal Ball.
So we going to the 8th edition. Most of our predictions came true, as always. Of course, we don't come out with our predictions until the event itself. But
I'll be trying.
I know you'll be going in that direction.
All right.
Yeah. I know we had this whole debate about Trump. Of course, you know, I got you on that.
Thank you, sir.
I never made any prediction about the Ghana elections. But at least not officially.
Yeah, I know what you said on record. Don't worry.
But having said that, I think that the year 2021, yes, is going to be a different year. I've already talked about the fact that we entering a new decade, and Crystal Ball is going to take place. But because of
When
COVID,
will it take place?
it's going to be online and
virtual.
Yes, it's going to be virtual. It's going to be virtual, and obviously because of COVID, it's going to focus a lot on the trends for 2021, 2030, and what businesses should be looking at. So we expect about 5-6 presentations, and then we will zero in on what are the real predictions, which of course we know people look for, and so look out for it, and it's definitely coming on.
I will not miss. I know a lot of businesses out there who don't want to miss. But I mean, can you just walk us in maybe one of those predictions that we should be looking out for 2021? Maybe one of them. Yeah,
you know, the predictions for Crystal Ball are segmented, and it's based on sectors, and you don't want to throw out one without relating it to the other. So as usual, I'll stay off the predictions for now, but rest assured that when they come out, you will be the first to have an insight before it comes out publicly.
Let's talk about the Ghana cedi, and again, it will be a very critical component in planning for it as to whether it will be fairly stable this year or it will go through the usual round again. Should I go into hedging if I'm in the export business and all those things? What are your thoughts on that?
I would like to trust the Bank of Ghana. The cedi, of course, between 5.2 and it went close to 6 at a point. I mean, on the FX market, it even hit 6 at some point. I would like to believe Dr. Addison's word that we expect a fair bit of stability throughout 2021. And also, because of COVID, I don't expect a sudden jump in the amount of imports. So for 2021, I would like to think that my prediction, if I have to give you that one,
I was just in a subtle way I've gotten your prediction on the Ghana cedi.
That the cedis, it may devalue a bit, but I don't expect it to be very drastic.
The president is being inaugurated to take a new term in office as well. Your expectations are level.
I think I've already made one, and again, if you read in between the lines, my prediction is that I expect a lesser size of ministers.
That is what you expect from me. Let me say that.
Yes. It's almost a prediction. I can take it as a crystal ball prediction. I expect that. I also expect expenditure constraints. That's very obvious. And remember, predictions are not prophecies. So I've not spoken to God. These are taking everything into account, and the predictions are based on a number of factors. I expect a lot of expenditure constraints, and as a result of that, I expect some expenditure cuts in various sectors, especially the ministries who have done their budget presentations and have capital expenditure. I expect some significant cuts in some of the areas and focus in the main areas that, and another thing I expect is a lot more emphasis on public-private partnerships. It's been on our books forever, for over 2 decades. I mean, some of us have been involved in helping draft the law and all that. But finally, I think we are coming to the realization that we need to be a lot more focused on that. The reason is that that's about the only way you can properly finance capital expenditure without massive recourse to the public purse and bloating the public purse. But we have to get it right, because the other thing that is a downside of it is that it also is a means for crony capitalism and for people in the corridors of power to be able to get projects for which they have no experience for. And that ends up driving away the real investors. So if we do get it right, and if we float the projects in a competitive manner, and if we do not wait until the very last minute, which is what tends to happen, and then we rush it. If we start early and go through all the processes, I think we can get a lot of infrastructure funded. I mean, our position in Africa and the Secretariat and your talk about commercial capital gives us the chance to easily become a logistics hub. And therefore, doing infrastructure in Ghana becomes an attractive proposition. So if you look at it from that angle, then it's likely that that's one area that we may be able to fund projects. But unless we can expand the tax net, I don't expect much from that angle because there will be challenges. At this time, this is certainly not the time to be widening the tax net that pervasively. So in view of that, I still expect expenditure constraints.
Let's look at some of the main challenges that the Akufo-Addo as a president would have to encounter this year as a president. What are some of the main challenges as he swears in, he's taking the oath in office, it's going to be the 100 days grace period and all those things there. What are some of the critical challenges or hedges?
I think the first 100 days will be buoyed by three key things. One is COVID related because schools are reopening, and what is the potential that it may lead to an increase in terms of a spike in the cases. So if the schools don't manage the social distances very well, and we get a cases spike, then it will have an impact on the health facilities, and that's one of the things definitely he will be confronted with in the first 100 days. But I think so far the management has been good, and if we get this right, then hopefully the country should be fine. The other one is budget constraints. The third one will flow out of the politics, and as you know, I try to avoid the politics of things. I look at the business side of politics and not the politics. But the politics part will be tight parliament and all attempts by both parties to become majority or minority. The other one will definitely be the Supreme Court case, which challenges his election, and there's a call for a rerun. So after inauguration, you still have to confront with these things, and in the midst of it, he nevertheless still have to deal with the first 100 days and implement his program. So it's a question of watching things closely.
There was one critical thing. I know you don't want to get into politics, but a bit about the impact of this, whether it has created some uncertainty and how that could also impact on FDI attraction. We've already seen some presidents sent in congratulatory messages to the president himself, the US president. We've seen Macron and all the rest. How will this court case and all the issues that are happening impact on those huge
I know the direction.
FDI?
I know the direction you are going. And Yofi, who is a GIPC boss, and we always argue about this type of thing. My view about this is totally different. I mean, I don't really think FDI is so much centered around political issues the way we make it look. Investors look at return on capital more than politics. And the investors, if you're talking about foreign investors, they end up finding their way around the politics. So, yes, it has a factor, but maybe it belongs to a different conversation. If you ask me, I don't think the so-called democracy has benefited us in terms of investment as much as we would like to believe. Okay. I think there are different ways that we have benefited from that. Secondly, I believe in the school of domestic investments. And if we drive domestic investments, it can attract foreign investments. Okay. And I believe it should be driven from the private sector, not the public sector. So I will not think that we will see a significant drop in FDIs because of the court case. In any event, this is a civil country. We are in court. We are not at war. Yeah. So if you're a good investor, I do not see how that should affect your investment decisions significantly. It may slow it down. In any event, COVID slowed down investments. So is the decision not to invest is not made only because there is a court case.
You think that, again, containing the rising debt stock and the concerns about us slipping into a debt-distressed country, i.e. meeting still the demands of electorate, could also be one of the biggest hedges for Nanado?
It definitely is. That which is why I talked earlier about the recourse into the private sector to finance, because Zambia is already at that point. I won't be surprised if we have to do debt restructuring. We've not talked about that, but probably it may happen. I mean, the Paris Club is already gearing up for debt restructuring. China is playing with the Paris Club, to the best of my knowledge, which makes things very difficult for most African countries. And there's another factor you need to look at. Okay, I said I was not going to go into predictions, but I expect Jinping in Africa in the course of the year. Now, and that's a prediction. Now, the point why that's significant is that China indirectly seems to be rolling back in terms of its expenditure on the BRI, which is very significant.
Yeah.
And the BRI, Ghana is one of the countries signed on to the BRI, funds a lot of projects, including the proposed Djibouti to Dakar Railway, which is a significant part of how the continent will be opened up. If the expenditure goes down, how do we finance this? So financing in-country infrastructure with PPPs is fine. But what about financing cross-border infrastructure? How do two countries cooperate to do that? In West Africa, we've done it on the West Africa gas pipeline. So we know how to do it, but can we do it again? So you will find that because of the debt distress, because of the need for debt restructuring, we need to totally think differently. I don't want to use a cliche, think outside the box. We need to think differently about these things, and it's doable. But if we don't think differently and we over-focus on the divisive politics we have here, then in 3-4 years' time, things is going to be even more difficult.
As you try and wrap up on this discussion, it's funny that the time running so fast when it's getting interesting. Biden win taking over Ghana. Let's try and zoom it down to Ghana.
What it means?
What could be, and I know it will come up in your crystal ball.
It definitely will.
What would it mean for Ghana, the economy, and even Ghanaian businesses? Because
I think it will be a return to what used to be before Trump.
Okay.
I expect a lot more from the likes of USAID, the types of projects like the Millennium Challenge kind of projects. Kamala Harris probably an early visit to Africa, which normally would lead to some FDIs coming from America, etc. So I expect that. And I think the whole, again, CFTA itself, which creates a bigger market, which are the kind of thing American companies like, is going to be an attraction. So if you are well positioned. So I expect that. But having said that, I must also say that I think we missed what I call the Trump opportunity. The 4 years of Trump, for me, was an opportunity for governments to have looked a bit more inward when Trump was looking away, to have done a lot more quote-unquote domestication, to have changed the supply chains before even COVID. I think generally in Africa, we missed the Trump opportunity.
What is your final advice for businesses out there? For those who have, yes, they've taken advice, they've planned and all the rest and blah, blah, but still there are some who are still sitting on tenterhooks because of, we still don't know what 2021 will bring.
Reinvent. I will go back to those, my 3 things again. Reinvent, if not already reinvented. And reinvent. Reinvent means take a look at the context, take a look at what is changing, and look at what needs to change in order to fit the context, because it can't be business as usual anymore. Integrate. Integrate in the sense that integrate your own systems and integrate the systems to the larger system, because this market is going to be bigger than it used to be. And if you are not integrated, you are going to, have challenges. And ideally, transform. But the first 2 are more important than the so-called transformation. Because if you don't reinvent, you cannot transform. If you transform and you've not integrated, it's going to collapse because somebody else is going to outdo you. It's going to be a more competitive market. So I will take it in those steps. And that's how I would like to see it.
Well, all too soon we have to draw the curtain. And I hope you've been able to pick some very interesting nuggets, and I've got my strategy already in terms of how that would impact on my work at Multimedia and even Joy News and Joy FM. Well, all too soon we have to draw the curtain down, and I believe that you've gotten some nuggets to get the strategy right for 2020. We have been engaging the strategist, the lawyer, Mr. David Ofosidoti, sharing some thought with us, and all too soon we have to draw the curtain down. Have a great day. This has been PM Express Business Edition.